The government, our regular meeting of January 22nd. Please join me in a salute the flag of our nation. Salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, then, at this time, we're going to have a moment of silence dedicated to our congressman of the Mosses, much too young. So join me in a moment of silence. All right, thank you. On that note, there's a lot of Secret Service people now. Who's coming?
We're just here to protect you, Bill.
Oh, you're the senator. Okay, roll call, please.
Board Member Connolly?
Here.
Board Member Durkee? Board Member Ritter? Here. Board Member Kimmelshue?
Here.
Here.
Yes.
Board Member Brown? Board Member Goldstein? Here. Board Member Calderon? Board Member Pittman?
I'm alternate.
Board Alternate Smith? Board Member Crowder?
Here.
Board
Okay,
Member
next up.
Zahn?
Next up is election of chair and vice chair. Entertain nomination for chair.
I move Bill Connolly for chair and Bryce Goldstein as vice chair.
Got it.
A second?
Is there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? That's how you're supposed to do it. Nominations are closed. We'll pass the ballot. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Okay, I got it again. Here we go.
Congratulations.
Back to work. Up is the consent agenda. Anybody up here like to pull something from the consent agenda? Any public comment on the consent agenda? Is there any electronic comment today?
None.
And there's nobody online? Okay, close all that. I'll entertain a motion.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Unanimous. Regular agenda, items for action, approve a resolution 2025-26, transit revenue diversification strategy to protect paratransit and dollar rights services. Andy.
Well, good morning, board. This is an item that falls in line a little bit with a lot of the discussions we've been having about our public system and the things that we do with it. Just a little bit of background on why I brought this forward at this point in time. We are currently working on developing, expanding some existing services, looking at redoing our routing, incorporating new technologies, and also beginning to work on our extension for Transdev to do public transit. So there are a lot of things happening in transit, and of course, affiliated with all that are the costs to run that system, and recognizing that there are increasing costs to the contract and delivering all the services. The services that we're looking at expanding are particularly expensive, more than fixed route, just because they're a little bit more specialized. They go a little bit farther, potentially go a little bit farther to largely serve more of the elderly, disabled population, people that really need transportation as best we can provide it with a little bit more specialized service. So, you know, we have several things going on that are going to increase the cost of the system. And then our fare collection has not been all that great over the last few years. It's coming up a little bit. But in looking at all of the costs that we're going to incur to the system, and much of it is just costs like anything that are increasing to provide a service, it means we got to look at the revenues that are supplying the system. So just for the background on transit and how it's all funded. So there are two main sources, state and federal, provide services. And of the state funding sources, there are two pots of money for that, really, for us. One is local transportation fund, which is sales tax driven. Sales tax is a cyclical, based on the economy, type of revenue. For the most part, that's fairly stable. It comes up, it goes down. It represents about 80% of the funds from the state side that come. Then there's another 20 to 25% that is revenue generated from the sales of diesel. And that particular revenue source is slowly declining. There's just less diesel being bought and sold, utilized. The electrification process is starting to take more of a hold. So even though the state revenues are probably more stable from the standpoint that sales tax is always there, but it's very cyclical and can be pretty volatile. So that's the state side of it. And then on the federal side of it, Federal Transit Administration provides a lot of operating funds for us, and all of the FTA grants that we use for transit operations come from the Highway Trust Fund. Highway Trust Fund is generated by sales tax, gas and fuel taxes. Highway Trust Fund has typically been on the decline, and I'm sure all the jurisdictions, particularly the county, that's been an issue for years. You know, how do we manage that? So as I kind of look forward down the road, recognizing that our revenues are kind of flat, there is somewhat of nothing has happened yet, but then there's been a fair amount of discussion on the federal side as to will the funds that have typically gone into transit possibly be diverted or reduced to invest in traditional, which also do need investment. There's a lot of infrastructure out there that's particularly roads and bridges that have been around for 100 years in a lot of localities. So there seems to be an interest to divert some of the funds that come in the federal side for public transit. Not necessarily all of it, but that also has to be written into the new transportation. Not happening. So that is something we're hearing about, but not necessarily rubber meets the road legislation into the new transportation. Nonetheless, when I kind of think about how the revenues are flat on the state side, with a piece of it starting to decline a little bit with the sales tax, what's going on with the trust fund, expenses of the system that we see going up, it really kind of puts at least me in a situation to think about, you know, what are some options that we can do if we need to come up with other revenue type solutions to protect and keep public transit going, obviously in a form or fashion that's the most efficient and useful for the county. So this particular resolution doesn't commit us to any particular program. All it does is it allows the board, as the policy board, to recognize that this cost against the available revenues for public transit is in constant opposition to each other, and that the revenues are flat or declining in the face of increasing expenses. And so in this resolution, you are really authorizing us to look at other potential options of revenue. Of course, any of those options that have solutions affiliated with them would have to come to the board, and we would, present what that structure is, and you can decide, is that something that we want to pursue, or do we need to keep looking at it, or other options? In the resolution, there are essentially two ways that you can develop revenue programs for local agencies. There are other agencies and counties that do this. One of them is non-voter approved mechanisms like service fee affiliate. So what types of programs would that be? I tried to identify a few of those. For us, public electric vehicle charging, we are looking at establishing charging locations in public places, in the jurisdictions. And of course, you purchase that electricity, you charge the vehicle, there's a service fee that goes on to that. Whatever you decide that service fee to be, that directly contributes to ADA, dial-a-ride, senior mobility, veterans, those types of services. So we get a little bit there that kind of contributes to that. Another possibly reasonable solution is what is referred to as institutional transportation support agreements with hospitals, colleges, social service providers, and major employers. So those would be the types of situations where a large employment center, it wants to have us try to provide more effective service for their employees. They want to pay for that program. Those are the types of agreements that you can set up to help generate a little revenue to the entire system. Yeah.
Who serves as the JPA for that kind of
You?
BCAG board itself, but not any of the agencies or the other benefiting?
No, we as an agency would just develop an agreement with them, specifically outlines the usage, fees, and the responsibilities for any equipment or infrastructure. We would take them. Other cost recovery mechanisms, additional fees, subscription service, premium, mileage-based fees. So there are some non-voter required mechanisms that we can look at that if we need to, I'm not saying we have to do this now, that we can look at to try to help support any declining revenues that we think we may need public transit. The other options are required voter approval options, and these are generally the ones that, like a transportation tax. The City of Chico, for instance, you guys have an additional sales tax that goes to public infrastructure and investment.
And a lot of other things.
All kinds of stuff. Those are mechanisms that can be put into place. Those are voter required. So those are kind of the two categories that are available out there. So I wanted to bring this forward and just put this in place so that we have a recognition in place that revenues are important to keep track of, and that the revenues are flat, on slight decline. Sometimes it's greater than others. There may be federal sources that aren't available to us, and that the cost to operate the system are on the rise. So my thought was, if we just had this in place to say, hey, we recognize that that's happening, that those forces are at play with each other, and that staff will bring forward to us when and if it's needed, any particular programs or ways of collecting some revenue to help offset or mitigate losses if we need. Any questions about that? That's a little long and windy. Sorry about that.
Oh, did you say that we could put a mileage tax on people, like all electric cars that are hooked up to the satellites?
Well, it wouldn't, I think, there's two things. Tax, when you say tax, there's two propositions.
Well, the state should.
We have to, what can be done is, and the state's working on some solutions too for the transportation investments. I want to be clear about that too. We were, Bryce and Tammy and Todd, we were at that transportation forum at the state, and they were talking about transportation funds. Those funds go into the infrastructure side, so they're not really part of this, but the forces that are driving that side of the house and that side of the investment are the same types of forces that exert pressure on our funds. So sales, our people, when the economy's good, are buying things. When the economy's not great, don't. So, like EVs are a great example. EVs right now don't really contribute that much to the infrastructure. So mileage-based is a potential topic to be discussed out there on the state side for the transportation program. That's hard to do. Mileage-based fees are hard because it means that now the government has, state or local government has some level of size or control over your vehicle. So that's hard to do. Establishing you know, a per kilowatt fee, if you're charging at home, is probably not easy to do. So there's some hurdles to overcome in collecting the fees, but there are ideas, at least people are working on. And there are other states that have already gone through, are woefully behind the eight ball. We started early, ahead of everyone, and lots of other states have already finished it. But for us, the EV solution is, we put public chargers in jurisdictions, areas where most of the employees park. If there's a need, then this, like if you're charging, you know, at Walmart or Target or any of those other places, there's a fee to charge your vehicle, and there's a small service fee that goes directly into, identified as going directly.
Those fees, do they pay for themselves, like, right now that those fee service stops at Walmart or wherever else, are they actually paying?
So I tried to do as much research as I could to find out, you know, well, what is actually generated? You know, if you're gonna put a fee on top of a per kilowatt fee, you know, does it generate anything reasonable or not? And there's a lot of estimates out there that, you know, if we had anywhere between, you know, if we had 50 to 100 chargers throughout the region in specific areas, that could generate anywhere between $300,000 and $600,000 a year. So the fee is not, you know, if you pay, let's say, just for argument's sake, if you pay 20 cents per kilowatt to have that electricity, and there's a 3-cent service fee on top of it, those are the type of numbers that are identified as generating those types of magnitudes. So I think it's feasible if we ever decide to go there. The other ones are simply if we're going to have agreements with institutions, the college, large departments, cities, any of the schools, if they're paying for a more specialized service, if we can provide that there is a premium service, and there's, you know, either a per mileage fee or a tiered service fee that you add on to that particular service to help fund any additional, any losses in revenue. The main thing really is try to establish, you know, a good revenue mechanism for that portion of the population that I believe most right. That is an increasingly elderly population, disabled population, and, you know, veterans are another source. So in Butte County, we're like any other rural agency. We have lots of those people in far-reaching places. You know, there's only a limit that we can go before it becomes. But we have some really good consultants helping us that have been through these programs. And one of them is here. Actually, she's here for she's our marketing person, but she's been involved in a lot of these types of programs. You know, there is a point where they're diminishing. What we're finding is it's clear we do have some gaps there.
I think it's safe to say that California probably has the highest fuel taxes in any state in the nation, right? So why wouldn't we have the highest fees on charging electric vehicles? I mean, I'm not advocating for, well, I guess I am advocating for that, because obviously with more electric vehicles on the road, which actually are heavier and do more damage to roads, you're not talking about infrastructure, but I would hope that the legislature leaders in California understand the situation. You have to figure out some way, and maybe, like you said, other states may be way ahead of us in how they do that, how they charge electric vehicles.
Yep, and I believe the state is they're starting to pick up.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I got out of that at Chico's.
A little slow, but they're
right,
definitely picking up on it. And the legislative analyst's office, that's a pretty sharp group. Come up with pretty wide-ranging solutions.
You sure? Yeah. We did it at the same time. We haven't had like our lobbyists, state and federal, talking about this issue. Maybe I did, Bill. So maybe we could have them in front of the board to kind of give an overview of what the state and federal is doing. Because it's not just electric vehicles solely. Hybrids are reducing the consumption of fuel. And so it's not, I mean, I like beating up on electric vehicles, but it's also the technologies of saving fuel is just incredible. Right? Diesel gets 20 miles to the gallon on the highway, where in the old days it was 10 miles to the gallon. So it's pretty incredible technology, but it bites us in the rear end.
I am meeting with the Ferguson group here in a couple of weeks and talking about it. What's our platform? And our platform generally aligns county simply because the county covers so much area and we're regional. We have geographical area to cover, but that is certainly an element that I would put before Christie is how is the new transportation bill going to address it?
That'd be educational.
Yeah.
Christie.
No. So one thing I know we're not there yet, but the, what would be required for voter approved. We just got a 1% sales tax increase in Butte County for public safety. I'm all for public safety. But Paradise, for example, we have our own, and most incorporated cities, our own police and fire services. CAL FIRE's contract just went through the roof. And so we're, wrapped with that. We're trying, obviously, to rebuild. Our building costs are outrageous. Our insurance costs are more than a house payment. And we've got school bonds that we're paying on. And I just think that if you try to put something else on the tax roll, it's going to really impact Paradise because we already have people not coming back basically because of insurance right now. And we're kind of taxed out. And I think, we have a 0.5-cent sales tax for public safety too. And, I understand costs, but there comes a point where, you can't keep going to the people expecting them to pay more. Because I'll tell you, Paradise is about maxed out on fees and taxes and what have you. And it's really going to start impacting our rebuild even more if, a direction like that would be taken.
Yeah, I'm not really in favor of that solution. I'm really just identifying it as one of the two mechanisms that are out there, and primarily for that reason. I think, the situation isn't dire that we would have to actually do something. There are other counties that have gotten to that point where they have to generate a lot of money really quick. That's not what this is. I feel like when we're going to know when it's coming, and we're going to be able to do something incremental that is appropriate to what I hope is not really a large loss or a huge shortfall, but just kind of start something trickling that negates it if we need it.
Thank you.
I think the logical answer is that vehicles that aren't contributing at the pump start right there. They have to go on a mileage tax, and it's some reasonable amount. Using him $1 a mile, but it could be like a nickel a mile or whatever the wear and tear caused by the vehicle, because it should be offset. Because everybody that has a gas or diesel vehicle right now is subsidizing them to a great deal. And then I agree, cars and trucks have got much more efficient, so we use less fuel. There's a formula to figure out. They just have to you got to pull the trigger and say, look, you got to carry your side of the wear and tear on the roads, the infrastructure, and help with our public transit. Right now, they're getting a free pass. And I have a really good friend that just bought a Tesla, and this conversation makes him mad. But I said, you're up to satellite. We could get you easy. Go ahead.
I think having the Ferguson group come and, sent to the board makes a lot of sense. I think that probably the solutions here are state-driven, largely. So I think starting there makes a ton of sense.
Got a motion?
Yeah, I still need to speak, thank you. Yeah, I think we're all on the same page. I mean, it would be really difficult to rely on voters passing a sugar tax.
That wouldn't happen.
So I trust our BCAG staff to do what options are. It sounds like we're all having some kind of way of getting electric vehicle drivers to help pay for the other services in the county, transit. I'm glad that the state and federal government are working for mile charges already. I think that's great. That would be complicated for us to have to do at a county level. That'll help with the infrastructure, and I'm really liking the idea of collecting funds more voluntarily, having get the charger fees for electric vehicle drivers. I'm excited to see what you all come up with. Happy if that involves getting, a presentation from the legislative analyst office or another group. I think you'll do a great job of researching what options are available.
Any other questions or comments by board members? Open public comment. Any public comment on this matter? Close public comment. I need a motion.
Move to approve, the resolution.
That's for somebody else seconds it.
It's just trying to step back.
I second the motion.
Very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Passes unanimously.
Find the money wherever you can.
Microphone working or maybe?
No, we can hear you.
Items for information. Number 8, 2027 Federal Transportation Improvement Program Development and Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Calls for Projects. On.
Good morning, Board. Staff is initiating the development of the new 2027 Federal Transportation Improvement Program, 4-year programming document that identifies all transportation projects that have federal funding and/or requires some type of approval by the Federal Transit Administration or Federal Highway Administration. It's one of the regular responsibilities that BCAG does as the federally designated organization. We update this document every 2 years. Since we're updating the document, staff is taking the opportunity to initiate a new call for projects for congestion mitigation and air quality program funds. These are funds that are apportioned to the region every year. Target is, it fluctuates, about 1.8 million to maybe a little over 2 million. We do have a fund balance right now, but our current estimates are about 2 million per year. So staff is issuing a call for projects for 10 million. Doesn't mean we have to program it all, but we're throwing it out there to see what your local jurisdictions come up with. Past projects, for example, have funded, we try to use the CMAQ funding strategically to go after bigger state or federal funds, such as the Esplanade ATP project, the Bikeway 99 projects, the Bike Bridge, and Oroville State Route 162 corridor, as well as the roundabouts by Bossburger and on Washington. In the county, we've done Palermo Safe Routes to School, for example. We put the seed money there. So we really try to use that strategically to do the groundwork, to do preliminary engineering, and we go after bigger grant funds. So this is a process that will work through the Transportation Advisory Committee, directors. We'll have public workshops and whatnot. A little early, but since we just completed the adoption of the state Regional Transportation Improvement Program in December, the FTIP usually follows afterwards. The schedule and more details on the programs and the FTIP are included in the agenda item, as well as a schedule. There's a target adoption in the summer of the FTIP, but those projects that do come, the CMAQ will be presented to the board before any approval. Then we'll just fold it in with the adoption, just to. Pretty straightforward stuff.
Questions or comments by board members? Public comment on this matter?
I have one question. So do you have like a list of?
I do expect, projects. One is the City of Chico's, previously program that we rescinded on the roundabouts at, Hagen and Midway. And I know Orville has expressed an interest for a roundabout, Orange, Acacia.
Yeah, that's it.
Any place in the county needs one.
There's that one, as well as,
Byway.
potential bike impediment on Lincoln, south of 162, to kind of connect where all that housing's going and make a thoroughfare for the community in South Oroville. So, you know, for Chico's, I think it'll be more for construction. For Oroville, I think more for preliminary engineering, so we can go after other grant funds.
And you're primarily looking at,
It has to be on the federal aid system, but the CMAQ is very flexible in that if we can demonstrate an emissions reduction for the non-attainment region, get real nerdy on, it's eligible. We get, you know, as a fallback, always transit.
I was thinking, City of Chico, we've had a couple of active transit. Will not quite meet the criteria to get funded, and so if those funded, I don't know that.
All projects also have to be in our long-range RTP SES. Then we have to amend the document. We're fortunate that we get the funds. It's not difficult to demonstrate an emissions reduction. And it's one of the few programs where I can borrow from other regions who aren't delivering. We did in Orville for the Table Mountain, Washington Complete Streets project. We'll see what comes.
Imagine some. Anyway, I'm interested to see what you come up with, and are you coordinating with our engineering on what project?
Absolutely. Everything we do is work through our committees, Transportation Advisory Committee with Public Works and Public Health and Air District. And we'll have workshops too.
So I just want to make sure that our priorities at the city are.
It's a good time to talk to city staff.
Any other questions by board members? Public comment on this matter? Close public comment, that's for information. You go to Sacramento Intercity Bus Service update. I could have rode that this morning.
It's been nice. Looking at some pretty nice buses with some leather-like seats and some.
That's slow away.
Give her that.
Yeah, just a monthly update on the Chico to Sac service. And that was brief, but we've got a lot going on. Like starting to get mired in the details of things. Tells you that we're along here. Just a quick update on the bus procurement step. We're getting close. We're hoping to have the orders out by the end of the month. There's a lot more details than I ever would have thought. I received the revised quote we were looking for, and now we're just kind of going through a few additional details. There's things like options for soundproofing of the bus to make it a quieter ride, looking at seats and seat quality, different floor options. Got to deal with the details on Wi-Fi, on radios, on router antenna combos, validators, having things pre-wired. So it's not as simple as just saying, well, that looks like a nice bus, let's order it. So, but we're getting close. We're getting great support from our consultant team at AMA and Transit Happy. They've got a lot of experience in this space. So I do think that we're going to put that order out here in the next couple of weeks. Right along. And then in terms of coordination, obviously there's a lot of agencies to meet with. We had a recent meeting with Capital Corridor JPA, which operates the Capital Corridor trains. sort of between Sacramento and the area, and then Sacramento and Roseville. That was a great meeting. They're very excited about what we're doing. A service that kind of aligns with their schedule, so looks like they're going to be a good partner moving forward. We also had a meeting with Chico State University, Jesse, who's attended a few of the meetings in the past, and he had some good input and a good partner too. We had another recent meeting with Reading Area Bus Authority, talking about some of the agreements that they've already had in place with Amtrak and with SJJPA in order to operate their bus services, so that's been helpful. So a lot of coordination going on. It's going well. We have meetings scheduled like next week with Yuba Sutter Transit, county folks. We're working on setting up a meeting with BCAG, which I think we just got set. And we're working on Caltrans headquarters and also District 3. Kind of going through our list. So that's all ongoing and supported with our consultant team, which is, yeah, in terms of next steps, you know, bus orders again, and then just continued coordination, and then working with our consultant team. We are looking at that, you know, timetable schedule that we shared with you previously. We're looking at refining it, looking at it a little more realistically in terms of like, when do the drivers need to take breaks? When do the drivers need to have lunches? Like, you know, how is this all exactly going to work? So we're ironing out those details. The thing we're looking at is, I mentioned it, but is the agreements that we're going to need to have with Amtrak, with SJJPA, probably with Better Transit, and getting those going so those don't hold us up when we get the buses here and they're painted, all the equipment's in there and they're ready to go. So trying to get it all aligned, and so anyway, so far it's moving pretty well. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? So I'm very ignorant when it comes to what kind of buses we have. So I assume, and one of the things I've always pushed for is getting people to the airport from here. I assume there's plenty of room on these buses for luggage and large items like that. And
yeah.
Also, how about bicycles? Is there a place for bicycles on?
Right. Yeah, we're taking those into account. The buses that we're looking at ordering have 2 different luggage storage areas. One would be above the seats, which is sort of carry-on, and then the back of the bus, the doors would open for like checked baggage. For sure, bikes. That'd be a rack on the front that'll hold 2 to 4 bikes, and trying to make sure it's 4 and not 2.
Sounds like you've thought of everything.
We have, well,
Probably,
it helps.
probably not.
And various people mention things at various times when we're in the office and we get emails and phone calls and meetings with other agencies. And we heard from Capital Corridor folks that a lot of people bring bikes on their trains. That make sure you account for that. I see at Chico State that the students like bringing their bikes on the buses, so when they get to where they're going, they can ride the last mile, here's my last mile kind of thing. So we're trying. If you think of anything else, you know, we're agreeable to.
Airport, you know, a direct connection to the airport is important for us to consider too. Right now, we're not talking about going directly to the airport yet. Let's try to get downtown to the hub and kind of see how that all works out. And if there is some way that we ultimately can go directly to the airport with a run, makes sense, then there's no reason why we wouldn't do it.
We also heard last meeting about the issue with strollers.
Right.
That's next agenda item.
Oh, I know, but he said, no.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I just had some comments, and I already emailed these to Chris and provided some helpful responses. I just wanted to make a couple of comments or concerns for the awareness. So we've added and changed a couple of stops from the previous study that I just want to note, and one included the stop in Yuba County, south of Marysville. And I think serving more communities can be great, but we need to be very cautious that we are using our county's resources as best as we can. So I'm glad to hear that you'll be meeting with Yuba Sutter Transit coming up, and I'm curious to see how that goes. I would advise that we try to get something from them in exchange for our serving their community, and that could potentially look like, I don't know, maybe some kind of cost sharing agreement, or what would be really cool is if they could help support through Miss Lake, for people who want to go direct there. I think that a lot of our ridership will end up being people who want to go towards the airport, but also people like me who need to go to Sacramento frequently. I actually was supposed to go to a training today in Sacramento, but like I can't drive in the dark in the fog. So having a bus early in the morning would have been great. And also I want to make sure that central commuting market doesn't see this bus taking over 2 hours. And that's why I'm concerned about adding stops at places like this. So we need to be cautious of that moving forward. Also, a service. So of the big coach buses, if they can have a bathroom and under 2 hours. And even stops that you're going to in the middle. Yeah, so I'm really excited about this. I think it's incredibly necessary. It is that we're doing our due diligence of really good service that choose over driving.
Bill and I were at Rural County Representatives of California's reception installation of officers last night, and Supervisor Gary Bradford hit me up, and he opened up with, like, I know you're probably just concerned, Doug, of solely, but is it economic feasible and can pay for itself? And I said, yeah, but he wanted to express that he's really for this project. He even threw out the idea that this route could, like, bring people from Sacramento to, like, recreational avenues, like, you know, like the amphitheater. I haven't analyzed the timing of all that, but, you know, you might want to talk to him. Sounds like you're talking to, you know, their transportation. Maybe reach out to Gary since he was so supportive of it. But I'm totally on what you're saying is.
I've talked to Gary, and, you know, I really love that he's supportive of our bus.
Yep.
People Sacramento.
Maybe it's a big revenue generator and they'll subsidize our ridership. So I don't,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
you're raising a great point.
I'm open to.
I'd negotiate a bus up to Clipper Mills. Big need up there.
All right. On that note,
All the people going
one,
to Clipper Mills.
that one person, right?
Yeah.
I'm
I'm with a book on that.
I'm sorry, what was that?
We could have a meeting with Gary Bradford set already.
All right, cool. Just reiterate, got a pencil out, Gary.
Yeah, that's right.
We're not stopping.
Get a checkbook.
He was really involved in the North Valley Rail project, big advocate for it, very excited about it. You know, that included a stop at Plymouth Lake. Seeing the bus service as being something that would be a good interest. Yeah, we're gonna talk.
Any other questions or comments for the board? Public comment on this matter? Close that, move on. Butte Regional Transit Stroller Policy Update.
Hey, morning.
Today, staff are presenting to you a summary and update regarding making changes to the current Beeline stroller policy per your request at the December 2025. In September 2025, an ADA request was filed for a specific modification and or to modify the current Beeline policy of strollers must be closed and stowed while in transport. On staff review, no changes were made at the time based on safety concerns and FTA guidance on ADA policies. These ADA policies were specifically stated in a 2015 response to an FTA complaint number 15-0117. The response states that stroller policies are a local decision, and there is no part of ADA regulations that require strollers to be permitted on board or dictates how they be accommodated. The complainant filed an appeal for the initial decision. She also attended the December board meeting, where she presented information about how various transit agencies in the U.S. and Europe address the stroller issue. She provided a demonstration to the board of her process of boarding with her child and the stroller in accordance with the current stroller policy and stated why accommodation is necessary for her to fully access it. Since that board meeting, staff has discussed potential policy changes. The discussions included inspections of the current line vehicles tied to using fixed route and paratransit service, what we commonly refer to as Gilligs, Freightliners, and cutaways. Gilligs have tie-downs in the securement areas that could accommodate stroller securement without breakdown. Freightliners, while used on fixed routes, have seat belts that are used at rider discretion. The securement area there has tie-downs, but the location of this area in the rear of the vehicle is difficult for a seated passenger to monitor. The cutaways have only one area for securement and also require passengers to provide a car seat for any child that requires it for California vehicles. Staff now believes policy can be modified to allow strollers on specific. The process will require 1, additional research into operational effects, 2, addressing the complainant's specific request to be able to leave her child in the stroller while service, while the vehicle is in motion and while the stroller is in an accommodation area. 3, crafting an updated outline of procedures for operations staff and passengers. 4, a considerable readjustment of passengers and community about this change, which is expected to take several months after any policy changes are finalized. Staff are actively engaged in understanding and making this the best stroller policy moving forward, and will bring a formal version of the updated policy for final board review at a future meeting while incorporating any additional instructions.
Questions or comments by board members?
I guess I'm concerned of potential liability of, a child remaining in a stroller, then an accident occurs, potential risk for this organization. I hate engaging lawyers, but I think a review by a lawyer on allowing people to, be in control of how that stroller is, attached to the bus. And then, are they putting the child in? Are they not? I think it would be prudent just to see what kind of potential liability this could occur. So it really concerns me.
I think that's incumbent, not even doing this. The existing policy, it's kind of a tough deal because the existing policy on fixed route is to stow the stroller and hold the child on your lap. So,
and that's airplanes too.
That's policy, and that's what lawsuits are built upon and argued upon. Not very good common sense in terms of safety of the young person, but it's policy of which, things are argued upon and decisions are made upon. So I agree with you. I think it's one of them, and that's why I specifically want to take time and make sure we do this right, because all the vehicles are different, and 2 of the 3 vehicles mentioned have seat belts, which are probably the best solution. So the toughest one really is the fixed route. And what level of liability are we taking on by, I guess somewhat willfully, intentionally, not ignoring, but choosing to modify a policy, good or bad, modifying that policy, and what type of a liability does that create? Even if we think that securing the child in a stroller, securing the child and the stroller to the bus like we would an ADA rider, even if we think that's better, has a potential better safety outcome, accident, there's still that issue of what level of liability is created by doing that versus and not policy.
I agree. The guys had a chuckle to holding a baby in your lap, but unfortunately that's been the standard for a long time. And so whatever litigation of that type of policy is probably, has a lot of case law behind it. Anytime you do something new, and unfortunately there was a tragic accident with a bus just recently in our area. But I could just imagine, you know how lawyers are, you just changed the standard to tying down a baby in a carriage, something happens, no one can get to that baby. You can just, any situation is new case law, and that is sad that, our society is just trying to get a buck. So I just want to be careful about it. No.
There are agencies that have chosen the solution of, and Phoebe can attest to this, that the child remains in the stroller and secured by hand while the bus is in. That's several large organizations are currently doing that. Now, that doesn't seem great either, but that could be an advisable solution for the policy side of it, for the liability side of it.
Now, what's our insurance say? And, just because another agency is doing it doesn't mean it's been tested by case law.
Fair?
Yeah, I mean,
It needs, we need to put it in front of someone who has the right eyes, for sure.
It also seems like the potential liability issues that are being raised are going to point us towards the most expensive and perhaps not the most accessible option, which is using paratransit for, or the dial-a-ride for any parent that is wanting, or caretaker that wants to bring a child on public transportation.
Yeah.
I
mean, that really, the paratransit dial-a-ride solution really is the one that fits the best for this particular case. But in Phoebe's case, and lots of riders like her, that may not necessarily be as convenient as this route is.
That's what I'm saying in terms of accessibility. It's, the conversation is pointing towards we have to be mindful of the potential liabilities and what could go wrong. But, in a perfect world, we have places to strap down the stroller. We have availability of belts and ways to secure people, and that's our paratransit.
We're gonna keep looking at it and bring it back.
Other comments? Public comment.
Yeah. Good morning. Pardon me. I just wanted to thank the board and all the people working on this, that bringing forward an issue that's really important to me and having it taken seriously is really heartening. So thank everybody that has taken time on that. I want to refer back to some materials that I provided, which were the recommendations from the UN. I believe it's the Economic Development Council through the UN, and they highlighted 3 specific kind of policies to keep in mind if you are wanting to keep strollers open. And they don't necessarily advise the securement belts or anything, but they say keep the wheels along the longitudinal axis of the bus. So if this is the bus long ways, then you keep it faced forward and not sideways for tipping reasons. And then wheel locks in place and keeping a hand on it. So that's what the UN recommends, and I'd like to, just have that on record. And then I agree that paratransit is an amazing option and one that I look forward to using more, but it does just kind of limit your freedom. Like if you have to have scheduled definite times for things, I just would want for myself and other parents to have the ability to I'll catch the next bus, and just have that be as easy as it needs to be. So I believe that's all I have for you today, but thank you.
Well, we'll try to resolve this before your children enter high school.
Yeah. If I see other people doing it someday, I'll just be happy, but thank you.
Other public comment on this matter?
Oh, I do have one more, that my advocates and I have gotten in contact with people in Seattle and San Francisco for their safety data since they've changed their stroller policies, and I'd be happy to send that along, as well as whatever research that everyone
That
else.
would be helpful.
Yeah, if you have that, Phoebe, you can.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
A parting comment.
Go ahead.
You know, when politicians like make a policy of stroller locked and a hand on it, I just think of physics, an object in motion stays in motion. If that bus came to an abrupt stop, I think the laws of physics would overcome the strength in your hand. It would be interesting, a scientist's review of that and its potential as a projectile. So,
Just as a guy that used to stand up in the seat with his hands on the dash,
well, yeah.
down the road with the windows open.
But that's a risk I take, you know, as an adult. But anyway, you know, science shows that a lot of policies that people make is just not a good, realistic approach. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah.
That it's very hard to keep something still if you come to an abrupt stop.
Right, and if you're in motion too. I think it would also have to overcome a wheel lock and potentially a safety belt, which is an option I would take gladly.
Comment on
If-
that?
Yeah, if public comment remains open. So I was a passenger in the December 12th, 2023 pileup where the Beeline bus was unable to stop at the Neal Road red light and plowed through other vehicles. That was quite an abrupt stop. And so I have some experience in being a passenger here. And also, since this came up at the last board meeting, I've paid attention to items that other passengers have brought on these buses, such as electric scooters with heavy batteries or shopping carts filled with cat food and other groceries. So in terms of the stroller potentially becoming a projectile, I think that's less of an issue considering the other items that passengers are already bringing on board and trying to hold on to with one hand. I agree that there's an issue regarding making sure that the child is safe if the bus does come to an abrupt stop, and I appreciate staff looking into that and my fellow rider looking into what other agencies have done.
Other public comment?
I just wanted to point out to the board and, that as we talk about paratransit and child ride in conjunction with the original, I just wanted to remind you that the original intent of the ADA is to make fixed route service accessible to the disabled community. It was not to push the disabled community onto a complementary services that feel last resort for people who are not a fixed route. An instance like this is borderline and also entirely possible that the parent in question does not qualify for paratransit and would not be able to use that system and would have to use what is available on the fixed route in order to take whatever trip it is.
Any other comments? Close that. Items from the floor, speak on anything not on the agenda, not agendized, we cannot take action. Anybody like to speak? All right, so I'll close that. We're adjourned. Our next meeting will be February, glasses on here, I think 26, right here at 9 a.m. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We don't even name